Well, it was a very special celebration of a great Australian life. I mean, obviously Bob Hawke, an amazing contribution to our country, an outstanding servant to our country, and it was a very special service. I guess the thing that stood out for me was the fact that so many people from right across the political spectrum were there to pay their respects, and a lot of stories were told, and with great humour, and it was a very special occasion, and I thought it was a very special and appropriate way to mark a great Australian life.
To the $158 billion tax cut package, are you doing any deals with the crossbench senators in order to get this package through the Senate?
Well, we're committed to getting income tax relief for all working Australians legislated. It is an important economic reform in our national interest. It's, of course, required in order to ensure that we continue to address bracket creep, which, of course, is a brake on the economy. It is required to ensure that we put more money into workers' pockets to stimulate the economy, to help create more jobs. It is something that we would call on all parties to support. We took it to the last election. We put it was a core plan. It is a core part of our plan to build a stronger economy into the future, to secure our future. The Australian people gave it their tick of approval. So we would call on all parties in the Senate to come in behind this very important economic reform.
Does that mean you are not going to be doing any deals with Centre Alliance or with One Nation in order to get this through the Senate?
Well, we obviously want to secure a majority of votes in the Australian Senate in support of our income tax relief reform. And what we would be saying to the Labor Party is that this is obviously an issue that was at the core of the election debate, the core of the contest and the battle of ideas in the lead up to the last election. It was settled by the Australian people. It is in the national interest for us to continue to build a stronger economy, and of course putting more money into workers' pockets, making sure that more Australians can get...
Apart from Labor,
Sorry?
If Labor and the Greens don't support it, you will need the support of 4 crossbench senators, including Centre Alliance and One Nation. And Pauline Hanson has said that she would consider backing it if you put taxpayer funds toward a coal-fired power station. And Centre Alliance has also come up with a complex gas supply proposal. Are these 2 topics, are you negotiating on these subjects with Centre Alliance and One Nation in order to get tax relief to families?
Well, these are different issues. These are separate issues. I mean, what we will continue to do is to persuade all senators, all non-government senators, of the merits of the reform that we took to the last election and which was endorsed by the Australian people. And that is to provide income tax relief to all working Australians, prioritising low and middle income.
So basically, you're not ruling out. You're not ruling out negotiating.
If I can finish my sentence.
Of course.
So we put to the Australian people a reform proposal to provide income tax relief to all working Australians, prioritising low and middle income earners, but providing tax relief to all working Australians. And we are phasing it in over a 7-year period in order to ensure it is affordable within the budget, because of course we want to ensure that we can pay for significant increases in funding for hospitals and schools and infrastructure and other essential services. We want to ensure that we keep the budget in surplus all the way over the medium term and beyond, and we want to be able to provide this income tax relief, which will put more money into workers' pockets, which will help to create more jobs by stimulating the economy.
You've mounted the case for it, Minister. You've definitely mounted the case for it. But what I'm asking is, are you going to be negotiating with these senators in order to get the tax relief to families?
And my answer is very clear. We will continue to make the case to convince all members of the Senate, the Labor Party, the Greens, crossbench senators, that they should vote in support of an important economic reform, which is in our national interest, which was endorsed by the Australian people at an election only a few weeks ago. Now, a number of other issues were raised by individual senators. For example, the desire to deliver lower energy prices. Well, that is a desire that the government shares. I mean, we have a very ambitious agenda to lower energy prices. That is something that we've announced before the election. We announced before the election measures to increase the supply of gas into the domestic market. We've announced before the election our plans for a feasibility study into a high-efficiency, low-emissions coal-fired power plant in Collinsville in central Queensland. We've announced before the election our plans for a price safety net and for, of course, our measure to stop price gouging, which takes effect from 1 July 2019. I mean, so these are issues that are raised by other non-government senators, and I mean, they go to issues where the government has got a clear agenda on. We're always prepared to engage constructively and in good faith with the crossbench. Of course we do. But these are issues, to the extent that they're raising issues with us, they've got to be assessed on their own merits. Yep. And we will continue to make the case that every senator in the Australian Senate should respect the verdict of the Australian people at this election, should act in the national interest, and it is in the national interest for us to continue to build a stronger economy on the back of lower income taxes, prioritising low and middle income earners, but providing income tax relief to all Australians.
Minister, the reason why the tax cuts are needed now more than ever is are needed now more than even before the election is because the RBA has, of course, last week lowered the cash rate, and the Governor, Philip Lowe, has urged the government to make some fiscal policy changes, whether it's infrastructure spending or passing on the tax cuts. But in a piece yesterday in The Australian, Shadow Treasurer Jim Chalmers basically says that the floundering economy is the government's fault, and he blames the government for the lower growth rate. He also said that, argues that the government has slashed infrastructure spending, delivering $5.1 billion less than was promised in the first 5 budgets. And he says that the claim that the government has managed the economy well, he calls it ridiculous. What's your response to this?
Well, he's wrong. I mean, we were very candid with the Australian people in the lead-up to the budget and indeed in the lead-up to the election that we were facing global economic headwinds and that we were dealing with downside risks in the domestic economy, which is, of course, why we made the point that this was not the time for $387 billion in higher labour taxes, as was proposed by our political opponents in the lead-up to the last election. Of course, we are dealing with downside risks. Of course, we're dealing with global economic headwinds, which is precisely the reason why we need to make policy decisions to strengthen our position domestically, including by providing income tax relief, including by continuing to roll out our record $100 billion infrastructure investment program. When we were putting our budget together for the 2019-20 financial year...
Would you consider bringing the infrastructure spending early, bringing it forward earlier, like the RBA suggested?
Well, when we put our budget together, we were putting our budget together on the basis of, obviously, all of that relevant information being in front of us, and we boosted our investment in infrastructure, about $100 billion worth of infrastructure investment over the next decade, about half of that over the forward estimates period. And, I mean, we'll always look for other opportunities to do more to the extent that that is affordable within the budget. But, of course, I mean, there are a range of...
It's a difficult balancing act
that we are pursuing.
It's a difficult balancing act, isn't it, though, to have a growth strategy when you're trying to deliver a surplus in the next financial year?
Well, our budget is a growth budget. It was deliberately designed as a growth budget when it was put together prior to the 2nd of April, when the budget was delivered. And, of course, I mean, what we focused on is, delivering increased funding for hospitals and schools and infrastructure and all of the other essential services Australians rely on, while also providing much-needed income tax relief, prioritising low and middle-income earners, addressing bracket creep, building a stronger economy, and of course, also maintaining the budget in surplus all the way through the forward estimates and over the medium term and beyond. And that is what we've been able to achieve in the budget that we delivered on the 2nd of April.
Minister, during the week of the leadership spill last August, you had a crisis of conscience, and I know since then you've thought long and hard about the actions you took during that week, and you are a very reflective sort of person. Do you think now that the election's done and dusted that Peter Dutton was right to bring on the momentum that caused the spill that week?
Well, let me just look. There's events in the past, and obviously the Australian people at the election endorsed, among other things, the choice that the Liberal Party room made in terms of the leadership of the Liberal Party. At that time, there was an initial leadership ballot which was not caused by any of us in the party room. And in the wake of the outcome of the leadership ballot, I certainly was of the view, and I've said that publicly on many occasions then and since then, that we needed to resolve the leadership of the country, the government and the Liberal Party with more certainty before we left Canberra that week. I stand by that judgment. It was a very, very difficult week. It didn't give any of us any pleasure whatsoever, but we were acting on the basis of what we felt was...
Did you think it was the right decision, the leadership change?
Well, I stand by the judgments that I and others made at the time. We were absolutely committed to do the right thing for the right reasons. These weren't easy decisions, but once that initial leadership ballot happened, and in the context of the outcome that happened, essentially we had to do the best we could to get ourselves in the strongest, most competitive possible position in the lead up to the election, and that's what we did.
Thank you so much for your time this evening, Minister. I really appreciate it.
Always good to talk to you.